This week, we sit down with Laura Parfitt, former Google data scientist turned entrepreneur. Laura is passionate about using data for good and finding mission-driven purposes.
Google has many pro points, but doing things for good probably doesn't score so highly on. So I think I wanted to then find somewhere that was able to tick all of those boxes, and a startup environment seemed appropriate.
We also discuss her aspirations in FemTech, the pressures of VC backing, and her preference for bootstrapping to maintain project selectivity.
I'm not really up for the whole VC kind of funding thing with startups, because after working at the startups, the worst parts about it is how stressful the funding kind of side of it is for the founders. That kind of level of stress and pressure just would not really make it worth it.
Join us for an insightful discussion on data for good, innovation in FemTech, and Laura's journey from Google data scientist to entrepreneurship. Enjoy! Laura, let's talk data. So what inspired you to take the leap from being a data scientist at Google to then a startup environment and then taking the leap and starting your own business?
Yeah, I think the going from Google to my own business was probably the ideal plan, but I needed a stepping stone or two to get there. So I think, by the time I'd started at Google, I was already kind of, about 8 or so years into my career. And I spent over 5 years there, and I learned a great deal. Like it was a growth journey there, but of course that growth plateaus when you're in the same place. And there were a few things that made me want to leave and do something different, which was, I wanted to learn more breadth of things, not just data science and product analytics, but how to run a business, how to do operations and everything else. But really, it's like I wanted to work on something that was helping people, or data for good. And Google has many pro points, but doing things for good probably doesn't score so highly on. So I think I wanted to then find somewhere that was able to tick all of those boxes, and a startup environment seemed appropriate. So finding a startup that was really mission driven, with like a desire to do some good in the world, and then being able to expand my skill set while I was doing that was the plan.
Yes. Okay.
And that happened.
Yes, amazing. So it may sound obvious, but can you give us some examples of data for good?
Yeah, well, I think there's like the really obvious one is when you're working for a charity. So have you heard of Mango? They do like something called DataKind. I think they're a related organisation.
Right.
They connect data people who have got different skills in the area with charities who would sort of pitch a project that they needed some help with.
Okay.
So I've kind of that would be an obvious thing, but it's very a direct thing. But I think when you're in a mission driven company, and data helps solve their problem. So I think where I'm going with this is in like health and wellness. There's this gap in the research, and being able to kind of help collect data to feed that research is an opportunity. So that's sort of been my more recent focus.
Absolutely. So in terms of, we'll just go back to pre-Google for a minute. Did you always want to work at Google? Did you want to go and work for one of the big tech companies? Was that always on the agenda?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I always I knew that Google would have been an amazing place to work, but I never dreamt that I could work there. Yeah. It didn't even occur to me that, they had data people. And I don't know why, just I never really thought about it for long enough. Yeah. And I got headhunted by one of the Google recruiters, and I was actually like quite surprised. You know, it just sort of came out of nowhere. I didn't apply for a job there. But I do remember at the time telling everybody like I've always wanted to work at Google. So yeah, there's definitely a desire to work there. I guess it was considered and for a few years later was considered like the best company to work for.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of people put ex-Google, don't they, on their bios, which shows that they're proud of it. Yeah. And in the beginning, did it live up to expectations?
It's actually a really rough start. They do these reorgs.
Right.
They do them like if you worked at Google, like, you'll be very familiar with a reorg and what it means. And I lost my job within like the first 3 months. Like my job got made, like the team I was in went from I think 6 people to 4 people, and I was like, oh well, I'm the newest person on the team here, so who's gonna keep their job and who's not? Anyway, I found a new team, and so yeah, it was actually really rough. It was like a very steep learning curve. It's a very different culture. So I'd just come from Marks and Spencer, so British institution, very strong culture of its own, very like you know, this is your role, this is what you do. You talk when it's your turn to talk.
Right.
You don't have an opinion on something else that's somebody else's role. You know, you stay in your lane and that kind of thing. And Google was the opposite. It's like you have to talk, you have to have an opinion on everything, even if it's got nothing to do with like your role.
Right.
You're almost performance reviewed on being loud and speaking up all the time. So it was quite a big change, to be honest. It was that was a bit of a shock to the system. And one thing was we had to do these Google Meet meetings, which now everybody's on Zoom. It will feel very normal. Back then, we weren't doing that ever. Yeah. And it felt very odd. You didn't know where to look. You know, am I making eye contact? How do I make eye contact when the camera's there and the screen's there? It was, even that was like kind of strange. But because Google's international, and your team would be all over the world, you know, different teams in all sorts of different countries, your interaction with your team and your customers would be via GVC even back then. So all these like small things were like, you know, I was kind of like a rabbit in that.
Yeah. And in terms of, I guess for you personally, there were pros and cons that ultimately led you to leave. But for those, you know, who've still got stars in their eyes thinking, I'd love to go and work at Google, what would you say? What did you get out of the experience?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, apart from the obvious, like it's probably one of the best paying places that you can work. And it brings with it a lot of opportunity. So I do think that having Google on your LinkedIn just means that people can automatically assume things about your capability. And so it really means that you've got a head start. And I think when like the economy was better and tech was not kind of on this downhill trajectory with all the layoffs and stuff, when it was more on the uphill, it was every week I would get multiple people reaching out to me. Do you want to apply for this job? Do you want to come on our panel? Do you want to come and talk with us? Do you want to attend this thing? It was just like the doors opened.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And then in terms of consultancy, because you then went to join a couple of startups, but they weren't consultancies, were they, or were they?
No, they were like one of them. The first one is a mobile game studio, and the other one is a FemTech app and ecosystem. So yeah, I guess where you're going with this is like the startups and then the consultancy.
Yeah.
So with the consultancy, I actually my long-term plan is to, I think, develop software.
Right.
And kind of microservices that do some really smart stuff with data sets and make kind of handling user data in a health and wellness context, especially in the area of women's health.
Yeah.
Making that really easy, and I hope that it would mean that like certain apps are able to actually offer a better, more personalised experience for women.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of long-term plan, but I'm not really up for the whole VC kind of funding thing with startups, because after working at the startups, I think it was one of the worst parts about it is how stressful the funding kind of side of it is for the founders.
Right.
And I think that kind of level of stress and pressure just would not really make it worth it. So I was hoping to go for the long game with the like building this software, but bootstrap that via more bespoke work.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a means to an end, and it's also a way of me doing some really fun projects. Like I am enjoying the stuff, so it's kind of win-win.
Yeah, so Data Phoenix is the name of the consultancy. So what do you offer that a larger consultancy wouldn't?
I think the obvious thing is that these larger consultancies are really bloated when it comes to their fee structure.
Mm-hmm.
My proposition is that, you know, with LLMs and all my existing data science and data engineering skills, the barrier to entry now for putting AI into applications has suddenly become a lot lower.
Right. You
don't need a massive team to do it. You don't need a massive consultancy who are going to charge £1,000 a day for a graduate to come and not do very much for you. So yeah, I think that's the main difference. And I think, you know, with I'm sort of looking at startups, and with my experience at startups, I kind of understand the pain points that they have and the way that they need to work, and how I can plug in to their existing teams will be quite seamless. It's not going to be some big drawn out process.
Yeah, I think plug-in is important, isn't it? Because a lot of the consultancies build up a reliance, don't they, that you can't almost operate without them. But really, a better model is to get them businesses to a position where they can function just fine without you. Not that they're completely dependent, but I think that is the model, isn't it, of a lot of the bigger consultancies.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, you know, I really hope that I could recognise what would just genuinely help a startup, and that is deliver the work for them within their existing team, and perhaps do like enough offboarding with the team so that they can then manage it themselves without needing to come back to me. Because that's I wouldn't want to do that either. I wouldn't want to sort of be needed to be called upon every time there was a bug fix. So, absolutely agree on that.
You want to make people independent. And then talking about FemTech and women's health, so despite advances in healthcare, there's still a huge disparity when it comes to women's health. Why do you think that is, and why do you think the issues persist?
Oh, there's a lot of reasons. There's the obvious, enormous funding gap for either female-founded startups, which obviously lean that way. Yeah, something ridiculous, is it 3 or 4%?
I think it's lower than that.
And of course, they're the startups that are probably going to be more likely to try and solve these problems as well. So there's that, and there's the whole kind of invisible women data and research gap. The amount of gaps in the medical knowledge about how the female body actually works just means that even if you really want to solve this problem, it's going to be really slow to catch up with the decades worth of medical research that's been done on male participants in these studies. So you've got a chicken and egg situation. I think a lot of the FemTech startups have got experts in the field on board with them, but those experts have still got like a big gap in what they know, because it just doesn't exist yet. So there's, I think, a need for an ecosystem effect where I hope that these kind of startups are able to partner more with the like research institutions, and that will help build up this like literature of research and studies into the female body.
Yeah, because without all the data, it's difficult to do the research. But, for years, half the population have been ignored, or we've been deemed the same biological makeup as males, but we are fundamentally different in more ways than one. And what do you think, so in terms of data and AI then, how can that help accelerate getting to where we want to be?
That's a really tough question. I think one of the things is, I guess my role in it is a small role, but what I'm trying to do is just make it easier for these kind of startups that are trying to do this, so that they feel like it's actually accessible.
Yeah.
I think I get a sense that a lot of these teams and perhaps the founders of these startups are sort of overwhelmed or intimidated by AI.
Mm-hmm.
And so they kind of just go, "Ooh, I'll avoid it for now, and it's a thing for the future when we've got a big team and we've got a lot of money." And and inevitably it gets kind of kicked down the like the can gets kicked down the street. And so, I hope to kind of help with that problem. I think the other thing is, there's a lot of system-based things that we could help with.
Yeah.
Privacy is like a big topic, and especially in the States. So, the Roe versus Wade thing in Texas. Do you know about that?
No.
So basically, I mean, I'm not an expert in like the Texan laws, but it's now like there are all these laws about women and abortions in Texas.
Yeah.
And there's something where, when I was working at Hormona, the FemTech startup, we got messages from people like who were worried that the US government would be able to see that they had used the app, and obviously the app is tracking periods.
Right.
And so if the government can see what your periods look like, they could maybe infer that you've had an abortion. So,
oh my gosh.
These American women are really, some of them really quite scared.
Mm-hmm.
And looking for, going back to that, the technical solution there, doing really well at kind of data privacy is important. And again, like I've got quite strong opinions on it, and how some of the period tracking apps, they've been in trouble, they've been sued, or because they've not done well at privacy. They basically sent user data to Google and Facebook for advertising purposes.
Oh no.
So that kind of level of trust in the users has been damaged quite a lot. And yet what really frustrates me is how it's actually not that difficult to do good privacy in your app. Data privacy practices and all the kind of tools that are popping up to help solve it makes it quite simple. Like, as long as you make a decision as a company that like this is your policy on it, and you just go and do it. It does kind of I am quite frustrated that these companies with lots of money are sort of failing their users.
I'm not surprised. So are they doing that for a money-making scheme, though? Because I take it they're selling on that data, so it's just another source of income for them.
I think they're using it for like targeted advertising.
Yeah.
So you could say, I don't know whether they're actually making money from selling it directly.
Right, okay.
But they are, I guess, improving their own marketing metrics because of it, by being able to like target people better.
Right.
So, yeah, it's just I think it's just laziness. You know, the desire to kind of move fast. Like, well, you know, we won't be really tight on our data privacy because we're a startup, you know.
Yeah. I also think, though, there's not an awareness from a user perspective, because me, you know, if I never read the small print, you know, in an app, and you don't actually know what you're clicking, but you are saying, yes, I'm okay for you to share. But I feel like human nature, we just see small print and contracts. I mean, I don't know if about you, but I'm just like, yeah, that's fine, because everyone else does it, and you think that's normal. But actually what we're signing up to is quite scary. Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, in the UK and Europe, we are better protected because of GDPR.
Okay.
And, well, if the apps are actually compliant with GDPR. But I do think there's a slightly better approach. You know, I think in the US it's probably a little bit scarier,
right?
Because they don't have the same legal requirements, and so yeah, you could actually, if it's a US app and your data's being processed in the US, you might want to sort of take a harder look at the privacy policy there and seeing what they're actually doing with their data.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I don't think we have that awareness, do we? But if you actually knew what you were signing up to, if someone actually spelt it out to you, you might be slightly horrified. But why do you think we don't do you think it's because the law struggles to keep up with advancements in technology, and that's why we're not privy to the information that we should be?
I think that like GDPR specifically is really complicated. So it's really complicated for like the layperson to understand. It's really complicated for like any kind of company who needs to be compliant with it to do so, because if you read all of the things that you have to do, it's all, you know, it's written by lawyers.
Yeah.
And even if you have a lawyer to help you in your company, which I assume most do, they're not technical, so they can't really advise on the technical implementation that would be compliant. So there's that side of things. And so, you know, what they're ultimately asking is for it to be, when you're like going through like a sign-up flow, it's meant to be really clear and opt-in only. Like there's no auto opt-in or there's no opt-out. It's meant to be opt-in for every single use of the data. But immediately that gets complex, because running companies is complex. You've got marketing, you've got the actual functioning of the app. You've got, you know, maybe we want to partner with somebody and share your data with them. And as soon as that happens, then like, why would users be? They just be, I can't be bothered with this. Like, why would you? I mean, I think you just really want to be able to kind of look at a company or a brand and go, yeah, they've got the seal of approval. You know, maybe there's some sort of certificate that you get.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a good idea, because we do need that clarity, don't we? Because otherwise, like you said, you're reading it and you're like, I don't know what this means anyway, so I'll just tick yes. So I think we could simplify it in that sense. I wanted to talk about wearable technology and advancements there. Are you a fan of them? Do you think they can help us in terms of, you know, empowering us to make better decisions with our health and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a WHOOP.
I thought so.
Yeah. So, yes, absolutely. I have just switched from Garmin to
I've just
WHOOP.
Bought a Garmin.
Have you?
Yes, I have.
Are you a runner or?
Yes, yeah.
Brilliant. Garmin, I think my Garmin's really good. And this is sort of trialing the WHOOP.
Right.
But, yeah, so, again, I because there's a lot of data coming from these. Obviously, I'm interested. I love understanding like what's going on for me, and therefore I can hopefully, see how that would help other people. If it helps me, then I'm sure it will help other people. The Garmin, like if I talk about Garmin, right? They're a company who are like, they have been designing like really high precision measurement devices for ages. I think that started with like cycling and like GPS. And of course these devices like track your heart rate variability, all sorts of stuff, breathing and
stress,
apparently. Sleep, and my frustration is that, and no offense Garmin, but you go into the Garmin app and you'll have said, oh, I've done some exercise, and the output of it is a chart of your heart rate. And perhaps if you did a run, it would be like your lap time and your distance. Like, okay, you've measured my heart rate down to like the most granular level that the device can handle. But what am I going to do with that?
Yeah.
It's lovely that you've drawn a nice chart for me. My heart rate this run seems to be on average a bit higher than it was from the one last week. Can you tell me why? Like, can you suggest any reason why? You know how I slept. I could tell you what perhaps I've eaten. I could tell you what part of my period cycle I'm in. In fact, the Garmin has a tracker for that.
Right.
And maybe you could even ask me if I'm not feeling well, like maybe I've got a cold or something like that. But it doesn't do any of that. It doesn't triangulate any of this data.
Right.
And so I'm there going, well, okay, my heart rate was higher this week. Does that mean have I lost fitness? Or is it something else that you probably know about? And my frustration is that there's all this data and it's not being used to actually drive the most useful insights.
Yeah.
I want to know the causes of things, or at least, a good correlation between things, especially period cycles, because especially, in fitness, for me, there's like a dramatic difference depending on what part of the month I'm doing the exercise in. So yeah, I'm pretty interested in looking at how that kind of evolves. WHOOP is a bit different because they are trying to be a bit smarter, and I think the insights are a bit more effective.
Yeah.
It does push you to train harder. It does kind of work that way. And then they've got ChatGPT in the app.
Oh wow.
And ChatGPT has access to some of your data. So it knows this idea of strain. It knows what strain you've done that day, and it gives you a target, and you can ask it, like, what exercise activity would allow me to hit my target for the day? And so the other day I said, what do I need to do? I said, I'm going to go for a 45-minute cycle. And it says, no, you need to do an hour and 10 minutes on the bike.
Really?
Like, okay.
That's interesting. You are right, though. I think the Garmin, if you're positioning it at athletes, then fair enough. They know what it means. But the everyday person, if you tell me my heart rate's high, I'm like, and what does that mean? I don't know. Is this a good thing? Should I go and sit down and relax? Or should I keep pushing myself? So why do you think there is a lost opportunity there when it comes to insights? I mean, I know you don't work for Garmin, and maybe this is in their product development team, but because I feel like I've seen this before as well in apps. Like, they give you a lot of information, but you don't know what to do with that information.
Yeah. I don't really know why these companies haven't sort of prioritized making their data insights more useful and insightful. I guess it's hard. Working in data and being one of the people who kind of develops insights from data, I can appreciate how long it takes to actually get to like some really, really juicy stuff. So there is that. I appreciate that, it's not that simple, and the different data points that you have per user, they're quite different. You might develop something that pulls in the menstrual cycle data for women, but what if it's like half complete, and how reliable is it? There's a lot of stuff that I think on the periphery just sort of adds a bit of friction to the process of developing like these features. But I think WHOOP is a good example of where they've figured out that it's a feature that I think users would really value. It will personalise the experience so much more, and that's key. And I think that's where the industry's going at the moment. Like, you really need to be personalising, because there's a million fitness apps out there.
Yeah.
And so how do you stand out, and how do you actually add value to each user?
So personalising, and do you think being simple as well is important, because they can overcomplicate it to the point that the average user is just thinking, I don't know what you're telling me, so I'm just going to give up with all of it.
Yeah.
So rather than relying on someone to input 20 data points, if they did 3 and they did it properly, accurately, you're far more likely to get accurate insights.
Yeah. I guess what you're getting at is that, what's the point of capturing all these like millisecond level data points, showing a chart that has every tiny little change in your heart rate, when the so what at the end of it, like where is that?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for something like an example is the MyFitnessPal example, which I always bang on to everybody who'll listen to me about it. But have you heard of Zoe?
Yes,
massive thing, and then they were talking about food labels, the calories that are listed on food labels, and they say 100 grams of this this falafel is this many calories, this much protein, etc. They're allowed by law to be 20% wrong.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it?
So you're going on MyFitnessPal and you're like, all right, I want to lose some weight, so I need to be in a calorie deficit.
Mm-hmm.
And you're weighing your food. You're there every day, every meal, every snack, weigh my falafel.
Becoming obsessed with it, yeah.
Can I have an extra Cocoa Pop? And you're weighing it, and then it turns out that if you've actually scanned the label to get the calories per 100 grams or whatever, you're off. Like you've there put all that time and effort into like weighing it really precisely, and the actual food label information is
that's so poor.
Where the variation?
I understand there needs to be some leeway, but imagine more about the 5%, maybe 7.5, but 20 is way off.
Because if you're like somebody like me, I weigh about 60 kilograms at the moment, and to be in a calorie deficit, I wouldn't be dropping more than 20% of my calories to lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
It would be more like 10 or 15%. So, who knows whether I'm in a calorie deficit or not if what I'm tracking is 20% out, and I could easily be over.
Yeah.
So
do you think that's another example, though, of where, like, the regulations haven't caught up with where they need to be? Because that probably came in however many years ago, and they've never bothered to change it. I
mean, I'm sure their goals are not the same as my goals. So, I think it's fine that's the case. Like, I'm not an expert in how easy it is to estimate the calories in food. I'm sure it's actually, you're never going to get it bang on. But going back to your point about the simplicity in the apps, it's like, well, does your advice that your app is providing, does it change because of the precision of the data you're collecting? Or are you just asking the user to put a lot more time in and make this experience quite cumbersome to tell them the same advice at the end?
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping that apps can kind of cotton onto this and require less data from the user. You know, ask the question, do you really need to ask for that data? Do you need that volume of data? Do you need that granularity of data? Does precision, an improvement in precision, actually change the recommendation at the end of it?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm tracking my calories, or I'm tracking how many grams of protein that I'm eating, and I've got a goal of 120 grams of protein per day, and I eat 125 or I eat 110, it doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter. Like, the studies about protein and how many grams you should eat per day, mm-hmm. The confidence intervals on the effect are wide. So you aiming for 120 and being like, oh, I only got 110, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So yeah, and going back to like data privacy, if you're not using somebody's date of birth, like the actual day in the month, for something really specific, why are you asking the user to share that? What is it that you're doing with that knowledge? Well, I guess you're saying that maybe it's like their age is a variable in some predictive model that you've got. That, let's say it was a FemTech app, and you'd give very different advice to an 18-year-old as you would a 45-year-old.
Of course, yeah.
But you don't need their date of birth.
No.
So, don't ask for it. And, just reduce the data that you're asking for. And, just really, like, sort of question. Have some critical thinking about what you're collecting. I think I've changed my opinion on this over time. Like, I was
going to say, as a data person as well, you often maybe the more accurate the better. And like you said, there's a place for that. But really, what are the motivations behind asking those questions? And is it going to draw any clearer insights? And if the question's no, then don't ask people, because when you're asking people to be that precise, it puts them off anyway, which means it may be less accurate because they just lie.
Yeah.
They just say anything.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if you have to put more effort in, and pages and pages of things to fill in.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, why? And then they don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So if you were to create a health app tomorrow, FemTech app, what would you like to see in terms of the data that people shared, and what outcomes would you try and strive for?
Good question. So I want to get rid of all of the manual clicking through screens of pages and pages of, have you got this? Have you got that? Every single day, it popping up going, oh, tell us, have
anything
you...
to track?
Yeah. I'm like, I've seen the engagement data off the back of these apps, and it drops off a cliff, because not only are you asking for users to do a lot, it's boring. Mm-hmm. Quite a lot of these apps don't give you anything back.
Yeah.
Where's the value exchange?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to see improved interfaces, and I think LLMs can be a solution here.
Okay.
So, perhaps you only log something when something's changed.
Okay.
Or you've noticed it. And then the app could be smart enough to kind of know what a baseline is for you. So let's say it was a period tracking app. Mm-hmm. You could start with a baseline, which is, what the app already knows about women, your age group, and perhaps you've already told it that you have regular cycles. Mm-hmm. Then we already know from the research that these are the common symptoms that happen and when.
Yeah.
That can be a baseline. Mm-hmm. And that can form the start of a predictive model. And only when you say, you know what, actually, my experience is this, and you said, maybe day 24 of your cycle, you tell the app, I'm actually feeling like this, I've got these symptoms, the baseline updates.
Yeah.
And then, you know, over time, it improves and it becomes a lot more personalised. But it's not starting from nothing.
Yes, which it does. Yeah, you're so right. And I think we were talking about the ability to leave voice notes. Are we there yet, or is that something we can look for in the future?
Yeah, so this is something I've been exploring with a startup that I'm working with at the moment. They're focused on menopause.
Mm-hmm.
And so the generation is Gen X. And I've heard they love a voice note.
Yes.
I'm not so comfortable with a voice note, but yeah, the Gen X love to record a voice note. And so, yeah, what I think would be like quite a nice interface for users who like are quite comfortable with that is you can just go, yeah, today I woke up, had a really bad night's sleep. It might have been because I was too hot last night, or it might have been I had too much caffeine or something like that, but it's really like, you know, made my anxiety worse. Press submit on the voice note, and large language model can just take that, process it, take all of the information it needs and structure it and put it in a database. You know, you've not only have you got rid of all of those clicking of the screens, and you don't have to like know ahead of time what symptoms to ask.
Mm-hmm.
But you've now made it really easy for the user, and you've written it to a database. So like you've actually gone from like unstructured data to structured data in your database that you can analyse. So that's an idea that we're exploring, and I've built a little prototype of that, which works.
I'll help you test it if you need anyone to leave voice notes. Do you know what I think? I love voice notes. Number one, because I stare at a screen all day. And I feel like so when I get home, I'm like, the last thing I want to do is be on my phone typing. So you can just be like walking around the house, voice noting. And number two, it's like therapy, but you'd have to limit it. Like on LinkedIn, the voice notes are only 1 minute long. You probably won't know, but as a recruiter, I leave a lot of voice notes on LinkedIn, and they limit you to a minute because otherwise people will be babbling on. But I do think it'll be a form of therapy for people as well. And you're more likely to, like you said, the engagement, rather than click, yes, I was hot last night. No, my sleep wasn't very good. You're there like, so last night, let me tell you, I think it'd be great. I think it'd be really interesting to see how the audience engage with that.
Yeah, and I love that you say that, because I've been looking at one of these LLM APIs, which is an empathetic LLM.
Right.
And it can detect your emotional state from your voice.
Okay.
And it responds appropriately.
Yeah.
So if you're like happy and kind of excited, it sort of joins in with your excitement. But if you're down, it will be sort of soothing and sympathetic. And
so the voice back at you.
Yeah, well, what it said, so it gives you, it can give you advice back,
right,
or a response. So yeah, I mean, you can imagine you do your voice note of, oh, this is how I'm feeling today, and like you say, you could actually have a sort of AI therapist assistant that immediately gives you a response to that.
Yeah.
So not only are you like logging that data for like analysis in the app,
yeah,
but you as the user get some instant value back from it.
Yeah.
And it can be like really empathetic as well.
Right. And I do think, like, talking about it now, that's what's missing. And it's not like we're replacing conversations with friends when you want empathy, or your family, but they do ask some quite evasive questions, apps. So if you're telling them, I don't know, you've had severe cramps or not slept, or you're feeling stressed or anxious, and that's it. It's very transactional. Like, oh, thank you, I've just told you how bad I'm feeling, and I don't get anything back, not even a motivational quote to get me on with my day. So if you've then got someone going, oh, sorry to hear that, this is what you could do to make you feel better, I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, I mean, you've reminded me of what you asked me before about like this perfect app.
Yeah.
It would do all of that, but my beef with a lot of the wellness apps and the recommendations they provide, like it's like, do some mindfulness, or change your entire diet.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want the advice to be really practical and achievable. And again, I think these apps could think really critically about what exactly they're asking of their users. Because, to be honest, if I'm feeling tired and anxious, the last thing I want is them to go, okay, well, just take an extra hour out of your day, every day, to do mindfulness, and within 6 months you might start to see some of the
just makes you more stressed. You're like, go away. I think the Garmin actually tells you to sit back and relax, and it's like, I don't need you to tell me to relax right now. That's not helpful.
Oh, do you get a relaxed reminder?
Or you're stressed. I was in the car, I was like, well, I'm driving, what do you expect? And it's not practical. So they are, we definitely need an advancement. I mean, obviously it's stepping stones, isn't it? But we're always looking to innovate, but a lot of them just do the same thing. I think we need something more, and I think empathy is a really interesting part of that. So will it be just voice note, or will there be a video element?
I think video would be pretty cool. I think you could use some of the AI models as well to understand body language, to see, I think you can detect obviously emotion on the face, and like if you're slumping over or things like that. But also always have a fallback of a text note. You're on the tube, you're not going to be like, my cramps are really bad today.
That's true. So you think, so fundamentally would you have the three then, like a text note, a voice note and a video? Would that be the ideal app for you?
Maybe, and you could perhaps even have like photos, like say one of your issues with your skin, maybe just take a really good photo of your face. And again, there are some apps that are already doing that kind of AI analysis of skin and making skincare recommendations off the back of it.
100%.
So all of this stuff, I think, is like going in the direction of like the UI is going to change, and it's actually, I think, going to almost feel like it's going away. UI will, the idea of buttons and clicking and drop downs, I think will go away. And like I know that the Rabbit and the Humane Pin, have you heard about those?
No.
They're these AI devices that kind of have a camera on, and they you're meant to be able to kind of talk to them, and they'll see what you can see and hear what you can hear, and you ask it a question and you're like, where did I put my glasses? And it will go, we saw that you put them over here.
I love that.
But they were a massive flop. Like they were
really?
I think they're just a bit too soon. Not quite.
We're not ready for that. The photo thing is so interesting though, because it's subjective. Because going back to these apps, I use Clue, and it's like acne, and I'm like, yes, I have one spot like that comes out, and I'm like, my skin is terrible, I've got acne. Well, that's not great data, is it? But that's how I'm feeling. And it asks you how your hair is. I'm like, a good hair day, a bad hair day. I've been to the gym, it's sweaty, it's bad. Like, I don't know what you're asking. So I think also there's not an explanation around it as well. And it's just so basic when I think about it. I can't wait for you to get on with this app. Because I think photos, and again, that's where it comes into it, the privacy. If you share this, it's not going to be shared with anyone else. And also, I think it's important for apps to tell the user why it's helpful for them to share the data, not just for them, but for female health in the future, for example. Because I think the average person doesn't necessarily understand how bad the disparity is in women's health. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think it surprised me.
Yeah.
All this stuff about, it was only in it's something in the 90s about like menstrual blood it wasn't being used to test sanitary products.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah. All this stuff, like, you just like, but how did that happen? And why are we in the 21st century? The 90s was a really long time ago now, and like, it's still, they're miles behind. They
are. So if we could say, if you could say at the start of the app, this will empower generations, well, hopefully our generation, but generations in the future as well, and, you know, end the disparity, I suppose, and help to. So would you think about partnering with, for example, I don't know necessarily pharmaceutical companies, but holistic or therapist or whatever it is, and say we would give them the data so they can produce a better product? Could that be an idea?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So when I was working at Homeowner, we built a data platform,
Right.
which just transformed the data that we got from what the users were inputting into the cycle tracking and the symptoms into a format that could be used for answering questions for research purposes. And the idea is that you know, they can partner with research institutions and maybe even product development teams at maybe at pharmaceuticals or other related, like skincare brands and things like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I think that's definitely one thing to do, you know, and being really wary of the whole selling the data for research purposes and you know, anonymizing it and all of that. But I think that, like, let's say you're a woman who's got a condition, like you've got PCOS or something. The gap in the research there and the gap in the solutions that are available to you, I think means that there's quite a lot of women out there who would be really willing and eager to sign up to be part of some research trials themselves.
I think so. If they understood the implications of that and how it could help people in the future. It's like, because that's when I started doing it a bit more accurately, because I was like, yeah, I can see actually why this is important, not just for me, but for women in general. But it's just having that awareness and simplifying the questions and maybe having photos and voice notes as well to make it easier. Right, we're going to move on to the data lightning quick fire round.
Oh.
What is one common misconception about data that you'd like to debunk?
One thing that comes to mind is that you only need Python to be a data scientist.
Yeah.
You need SQL.
Yeah.
Everybody who's learning to be a data scientist, please learn SQL.
Right. Python is the one that, you know, people always talk about Python. But SQL is fundamental, would you say then?
Yeah, I mean, as well as Python. Yeah,
you need both. Python maybe sounds a bit sexier. I don't know. SQL's been around a bit longer. Do you think that's why?
Yeah, it's like institutions. You know, you've got a big crunchy database that you need to like crank the handle on.
Yeah, I think that's the connotation, isn't it? Name a book, podcast, or event that every data enthusiast should explore.
I think that Women in Data, given our conversation, is a good conference.
Yes, yeah.
With lots of really kind of inspiring stories and
It's amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember going there and I was just like, wow. You come out like you feel inspired but also annoyed at the same time. It's like reading Invisible Women.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, we're great, but also it's so unfair.
Yeah.
The kind of mixed emotions. Finish this sentence, data is the key to.
I can't help but say my heart. like that sounds ridiculous because it's not.
It's not.
Maybe a heart monitor. Data is the key to answers.
Yes, it is. What is one piece of advice you'd give to someone just starting a career in data, aside from using SQL?
Learn SQL.
You've had that one already. Learn SQL.
Yeah. I think I've not got anything like really groundbreaking, but it's like you've got to do real projects. So, you know, all these kind of boot camps are all well and good, but you know, none of these, like watching a load of videos is not going to get you a job. It's not going to mean that you've got the skill, you've got the skills to do this day to day. So create your own solution. You know, think about a problem that you might be able to solve and actually just go and do it and work through all the kind of problems that you will hit in real life. A ton of them will be cleaning the data, and you need to learn that. And all of these courses and Kaggle, they're all like really sanitized data sets, and it's just not accurate representation of what you do day to day on the job.
Right, okay, that's a good one. Looking to the future, what do you think will be the greatest development in data in the next 5 years?
I think it's already happened.
Do you? Yeah.
ChatGPT.
There's not going to be another wave.
I mean, I think the surprise of how amazing GPT-3 and the large language models last year, that kind of step change was not really. I wouldn't have predicted it.
No.
I saw the output of GPT-2 and OpenAI's like previous research, and it was, this is fun, but like I would never have dreamed that it would look like what it looks like now. So
yeah,
I feel like right now predicting anything is really hard because it's insane at the moment.
Yeah. You think what you'd like to see maybe is more empathetic then in terms of the large language models? Do you think that's a development that we'll see more and more?
Yeah, I mean, that's already here.
Yeah.
It's perhaps lesser known.
Yes.
I think what needs to happen though, and I assume it will, is this the LLMs, this hallucination problem. It's not so much a problem, it's actually by design. Like the LLMs are not meant to be grounded in truth. Like by design, they're not grounded in truth. But perhaps combining LLMs with something like a knowledge graph representation, if there's a way to sort of scaffold the LLM off what we think of as the truth. I mean, we're getting a bit philosophical when I start thinking about this. It's like, what is truth? But a solution to that, I think, is imminent because everybody's like, it has to happen. Yeah,
it's a hot topic at the moment. Well, amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Went super quick, didn't it?